The air in the grand foyer, usually thick with the scent of old money and lemon polish, suddenly turned acrid. My mother, Elara, her face a mask of practiced serenity, pressed a starched, rough spun apron into my hands. Her voice, a silken whisper laced with venom, cut deeper than any blade. "You're not family, Victoria," she hissed, her blue eyes cold as glacial ice, raking over me. "You're a hired hand. Now make yourself useful." She believed she was diminishing a disobedient daughter, reducing me to a forgotten domestic. She had no inkling she was addressing a major general, the secret architect of the very ground beneath her polished shoes. The decree that would dismantle her dominion had already been meticulously drafted. "I am Major General Victoria Vance, 37 years young, and I was driving home." The wheels of my weathered Ford Expedition hummed a low, comforting tune against the pristine asphalt, guiding me through the perfectly manicured avenues of McLean, Virginia. Autumn had painted the ancient maples in a riot of gold and crimson, a fiery canopy above a world that had long since ceased to feel like my own. Each turn was a phantom limb, familiar yet profoundly foreign. After years spent amidst the dust-choked plains of Afghanistan and the sterile, echoing corridors of the Pentagon, this suburban opulence felt like a distant, alien planet. Then, the house emerged from the vibrant foliage, as imposing and unyielding as memory had cast it, a colonial revival mansion, its white columns gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Its perfect lawn, a verdant carpet of emerald green. The white picket fence, ostensibly a symbol of welcome, had always felt more like a formidable barrier, a stark demarcation between their world and the rugged landscape of my own. I brought the expedition to a halt, cut the engine, and drew a slow, deliberate breath. The silence within the confines of my vehicle was a cherished confidant. The silence I was about to enter would prove to be a weapon. I used my own key, a subtle act of defiance, to let myself in. The air within was cool, still, carrying faint traces of lemon polish and the unmistakable aroma of inherited wealth. No welcoming voice echoed through the cavernous space. My gaze, sharp and unwavering, immediately found the grand foyer wall, drawn to the void where a photograph of me, ramrod straight and beaming with the unvarnished pride of my West Point graduation, once hung. It was gone. In its place, a colossal oil painting dominated the wall, a grand portrait of my mother, Elara, and my younger brother, Liam. They were posed at some opulent charity gala, my mother resplendent in cascading silk, my brother impeccable in a bespoke tuxedo, their smiles radiating a practiced, effortless success. I had been systematically erased. Elara glided from the living room, a crystal flute of pale gold Chardonnay clutched elegantly in her hand. Beside her, a woman in a severe black pantsuit, the wedding planner, I surmised. My mother's eyes, the identical shade of blue as my own, but colder, swept over me in a swift, dismissive descent. Her gaze lingered, a silent, thorough assessment of my simple jeans and sweater, concluding, as always, that I was inherently lacking. Then she spoke, her voice carrying just enough volume for the planner to overhear, a performance of casual dismissal meticulously orchestrated for maximum impact. "Victoria, your room is upstairs, next to the storage room. You can retrieve your own towels from the linen closet." She turned away without another word, resuming her conversation about floral arrangements as if I were a delivery person who had merely deposited a package and outlived my utility. I stood there for a suspended moment in the marble-floored entryway, a specter in the very house of my youth. That evening, the performance escalated. The house swelled with a low, constant murmur of power, the collective hum of my mother's inner circle, a meticulously curated collection of Washington, D.C.'s elite politicians, lobbyists, and titans of industry, all sipping Elara's exorbitantly priced wine and bartering influence. I attempted to engage in conversation, to locate some neutral ground amidst the ostentatious display, but I felt like an anthropologist observing a peculiar, alien tribe. It was then that Elara approached me, her smile fixed and brilliant, a politician's most potent weapon. She pressed something crisp and white into my hand, an apron. "Victoria, darling," she purred, her voice a sweet, poisonous melody. "I know you're not acquainted with most of our esteemed guests here. How about you assist the staff with the hors d'oeuvres? You're quite accustomed to serving, after all, aren't you?" The words hung suspended in the perfumed air, a public indictment. A few of the nearby guests offered stifled, polite chuckles. I glanced at Liam. My younger brother stood engrossed in conversation with a senator, and upon hearing our mother's words, he merely offered a dismissive shrug, a minuscule gesture of indifference, before returning to his discourse on his latest architectural endeavor. He was an accomplice in his profound apathy. A searing flush of shame crept up my neck, igniting my face. In that agonizing moment, I ceased to be a major general in the United States Army. The 2 stars on my shoulders, earned through the relentless crucible of sweat, blood, and sleepless nights, felt as though they had been brutally stripped away. I was merely a helper, a forgotten prop, an inconvenient presence in a pristine white apron. The final, crushing blow came mere moments later. A woman with a genuinely kind face, one of Alara's acquaintances from a charity board, inquired about my profession. Before I could even formulate a reply, Alara swooped in, placing a possessive hand on my arm, her touch both dismissive and condescending. "Oh, she has some sort of administrative job for the government," my mother announced brightly, as if discussing a mildly interesting, yet utterly trivial, hobby. "Very stable, but a bit dry. Administrative." The word was a calculated insult, meticulously chosen to sandpaper my entire career down to something minuscule, mundane, and utterly unimpressive. The sensation of being comprehensively erased was now complete. My throat constricted, the air suddenly thick and suffocating. I was invisible, a silent servant whose sole purpose was to remain unseen and unheard by the real family. I uttered not a single word. I simply offered a clipped nod to the kind woman, extricated myself from my mother's proprietary grasp, and walked away from the glittering, hollow party. My steps were steady, measured, as I moved through the house and into the quiet sanctuary of the kitchen. The fading sounds of manufactured laughter and the delicate clinking of glasses receded behind me. Beneath the unforgiving glare of the fluorescent lights, I untied the apron strings. For a suspended second, I held the starchy white fabric in my hand, then let it drop into the gleaming stainless steel trash can, landing with a soft thud atop a pile of discarded lemon peels. It was not an act born of anger. It was a silent, unequivocal declaration of war. Sleep, that night, was a fleeting, elusive comfort. In the sterile silence of the guest room, the very room adjacent to the storage closet, the image of the white apron cascading into the trash replayed endlessly in my mind. It was a clean, sharp memory, yet it was muddled by a single, echoing question that had haunted me for 2 decades. Why, Mother? Why do you despise what I am so profoundly? There was only one sanctuary where I could even begin to unearth an answer. Before the first tendrils of dawn crept across the sky, I was back in my Ford Expedition, driving through the hushed, sleeping suburbs towards Arlington National Cemetery. A thin, ethereal mist clung to the ground, softening the sharp edges of the world. The air was crisp, carrying the profound sense of damp earth and fallen leaves. Here, the silence was fundamentally different. It was not the weaponized silence of my mother's opulent house. It was a profound blanket of reverence, a deep, abiding quiet that held the immense weight of countless stories of service and sacrifice. I walked through the endless sea of pristine white marble headstones, each one a stark testament to a life lived for something far greater than oneself. I located his marker with an aching familiarity. The grass around it was meticulously trimmed. Marcus Vance Conall, United States Army. I stood before the cold, white stone, my breath pluming in the chilly morning air. This was the only person who had ever truly seen me, not the difficult daughter, not the puzzling anomaly, but me. Closing my eyes, I could almost feel the cool Virginia night air from years ago, a phantom caress on my skin. I was a girl again, sitting on the back porch with my father, our heads tilted upward towards the vast, inky canvas of the night sky. He wasn't merely pointing out constellations, he was teaching me to navigate. His finger, strong and steady, would trace the intricate patterns in the heavens. "Alara only sees the brightest stars, Victoria," he had said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. "She gravitates towards things that glitter, things that loudly announce themselves. But a true soldier, a true navigator, understands that it's the dimmer stars, the ones you must search for, that truly guide you when you're lost in the dark. Be a dim star, honey. Be quiet, be constant, and never lose your heading." His words were a comforting ghost, a profound presence in the morning mist. He understood her, and by extension, he understood my precise place in her meticulously ordered universe. I was not a bright star. I was not destined for her self-serving sky. A torrent of memories, sharp and exquisitely painful, broke through the fragile calm. The day my acceptance letter from West Point arrived, it was a thick, important-looking envelope. I had held it in my trembling hands, my heart hammering with a joy so pure it felt capable of lifting me off the very ground. I presented it to Alara. She took it, her perfectly manicured fingers barely brushing the paper, and tossed it onto the polished mahogany dining table, as if it were nothing more than unsolicited junk mail. "You're ruining your life, Victoria," she had declared, her voice utterly devoid of warmth. "You'll become hard and coarse. No decent man from McLean will ever want to marry a soldier." There was no pride, no congratulations, only a cold, immutable verdict. A life sentence delivered without appeal. That same week, my younger brother Liam, in stark contrast, won a regional school art competition, a simple ribbon, and a modest certificate. For that, Alara orchestrated a lavish backyard party. She invited over 100 guests. There were caterers, a string quartet, and endless flutes of champagne. All for a child's crayon drawing. The profound injustice of it burned, an unquenchable ember in my memory. But my father, my quiet, constant star, had found a way to celebrate. He had snuck me out of the house that evening, away from the tinkling laughter and forced smiles. He drove us into D.C., to Ben's Chili Bowl, a loud, wonderfully chaotic institution that existed in a universe diametrically opposed to my mother's meticulously curated world. We sat at the counter, and he ordered us his favorite item on the menu, 2 chili half-smokes sizzling hot and smothered in their legendary chili. That greasy, unpretentious, utterly delicious meal was the most profoundly meaningful celebration of my entire life. As I ate, he had looked at me, his eyes brimming with the pride my mother had so cruelly denied me. "Don't you ever let anyone tell you your dreams aren't worth celebrating," he had said, his voice firm and resonant above the diner's happy clamor. Not ever. Now, standing at his grave, the memory was so vivid I could almost taste the chili. The stark contrast between my father's quiet, unwavering validation and my mother's loud, public disapproval was the precise blueprint of my childhood. I reached into my pocket and retrieved a challenge coin from my old unit. It was heavy and cool in my palm, a soldier's tradition, a small, tangible token of respect and remembrance left for a fallen comrade. I leaned down and placed it carefully on the smooth, cold marble of his headstone. The metal made a soft, definitive click against the stone. I whispered into the quiet air, my words meant for him alone. "Dad, I'm not lost. I'm just in the dark right now. But I remember your lesson. I remember the stars." I drew a deep, steadying breath. It was time I learned to be my own guide star, even if no one else could perceive its light. A new resolve, cold and unyielding, settled in my heart. It was not the hot, consuming fire of revenge. It was something far colder, far stronger. It was a steely determination to honor his enduring legacy, to reclaim the very definition of service and honor that my mother had so assiduously tried to tarnish. I stood up, squared my shoulders, and turned away from the grave. The morning mist was beginning to burn off, and the first resolute rays of sunlight were piercing through the trees, glinting off the endless rows of white marble. I was walking out of the shadows, and I knew, with an unshakable certainty, that the path ahead would be unequivocally my own. The path of a dim star, my father had called it. Driving away from Arlington, a profound realization settled upon me. My entire adult life had been lived on that path. It was a journey paved not with my mother's fleeting approval or my brother's facile successes, but with the grit of sweat, the clinging mud of sacrifice, and the stony silence of my family's indifference. The memories returned not as a gentle stream, but as a series of sharp, vivid snapshots. West Point. The endless nights spent shivering in the cold, wet mud during grueling field exercises, my muscles screaming in protest. The punishing physical trials that pushed me to the precipice of collapse, my lungs burning, my vision tunneling to a pinpoint. I remembered the subtle, corrosive condescension from some of the male cadets, the quiet shock etched onto their faces when I not only kept pace but consistently surpassed them in tactical simulations. Their surprise was a quiet fuel, burning fiercely alongside the sacred memory of my father. Each small victory was a silent affirmation that I was on the right path, even if it was a profoundly lonely one. Then, Afghanistan. The memories shifted from the verdant, rolling hills of New York to the beige, dusty, and unforgiving landscapes of Helmand Province. I was a young first lieutenant then, leading a patrol through a remote, desolate village. The air was a constant, suffocating companion, thick with dust, tension, and the ever-present, insidious threat of danger. My world was defined by the oppressive weight of my gear, the comforting, familiar feel of my rifle in my hands, and the vulnerable faces of the soldiers who had entrusted me with their very lives. I learned a new language there, a language unspoken. I learned to discern a person's true intent, not in their carefully chosen words, but in the fleeting flicker of their eyes, in the subtle posture of their shoulders, in the charged, pregnant silence between two distant gunshots. These were lessons in the brutal realities of human nature, in the raw mechanics of survival, lessons that no Ivy League university could ever impart to my younger brother Liam. He learned about aesthetics and architectural structures. I learned about life and death. One memory from that harrowing time remains a permanent, unhealed scar on my soul. It was Christmas time. I was in Kandahar, at a makeshift forward operating base, just hours after an ambush had mercilessly claimed the life of a good soldier, a young man from Ohio with a faded picture of his high school sweetheart taped inside his helmet. I was bone-weary, consumed by grief, and a million miles from anything that remotely resembled home. I managed to establish a video call. The screen flickered to life, revealing our family living room in McLean, a scene lifted directly from a holiday card, a towering, brilliantly lit Christmas tree, Alara and Liam laughing, crystal glasses of eggnog clutched in their hands. They were ensconced in warmth, comfort, and safety. My mother's practiced smile faltered when she saw me, my face caked in grime, my eyes hollow with the profound exhaustion of combat. She sighed, a sound of faint annoyance, barely concealed irritation. "Oh goodness, Victoria, you look dreadful. Are you eating properly?" That was her very first question. Not? Are you okay?" Liam leaned into the frame, his face beaming with oblivious self-satisfaction. "Hey sis, Mom just got me a new BMW for my promotion." The word struck me with physical force. A new car. A man I considered a brother was dead, and my own brother was celebrating a luxury vehicle. No one asked about the firefight. No one asked about my men. Suddenly, a siren blared on my end, the unmistakable, chilling sound of an incoming rocket attack. I had to go. The last thing I heard before I cut the connection was my mother's voice, turning to Liam, completely unfazed. "Come on, let's go pick out your outfit for the golf club party." The screen went black, leaving me enveloped in the deafening roar of the siren and an even more deafening silence in my heart. Now, years later, I sat in the anonymous comfort of a Starbucks, not far from that very house. The comforting aroma of roasted coffee beans and warm pastries was a world away from the dust and despair of Kandahar. My encrypted government laptop lay open before me, the quiet hum of its fan a familiar, reassuring sound. I scrolled through my inbox, a digital testament to the life my family steadfastly refused to acknowledge. There was an email bearing an official invitation to be a keynote speaker at an international security conference in London. Another was a commendation from the Pentagon itself on an intelligence brief I had meticulously authored, a brief that had directly influenced national policy. My work possessed weight. It possessed profound meaning. It was recognized at the highest echelons of power. I took a slow sip of my black coffee, a bitter smile touching my lips. The world, the vast, discerning world, perceived me as a major general, a strategist, a leader. I was respected by my peers and implicitly trusted by my superiors. Yet, in the magnificent colonial house just a few short miles down the road, I remained the girl who was never quite good enough, the one not worthy of celebration, the one best suited to don an apron and serve the frail guests. The world saw a major general, but my family, blinded by their own self-serving narratives, saw only a ghost, a useful, but ultimately invisible one. I was still seated in that Starbucks, the bitter smile lingering on my lips as I stared at the commendation from the Pentagon on my laptop screen. The world saw me, but my family, in their self-imposed blindness, did not. The familiar ache of that brutal truth was settling in when a new email, unexpected and intriguing, popped into my inbox. The subject line was deceptively simple, coffee. But it was the sender's name that made my heart skip a beat. Ava Rossi. I knew that name. Captain Ava Rossi. My brother Liam's fiancée. I opened the email. It was short and to the point, suggesting a meeting at a quiet coffee shop in DuPont Circle. No explanation, just a time and a precise location. My instincts, sharpened by years of assessing threats in hostile environments, told me this was far from a social call. This was reconnaissance. The following day, I located the small, independent coffee shop tucked away on a quiet side street. It was the kind of place with mismatched furniture and eclectic local art adorning the walls, a world light, years away from the sterile perfection of my mother's home. Ava was already there, seated at a small table in the corner, dressed in civilian clothes, a simple sweater and jeans. She looked different, less formal than in her uniform, but she still carried herself with the unmistakable, disciplined posture of a soldier. She rose as I approached. "Major General," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Captain," I replied, taking the seat opposite her. "Thank you for meeting me." She wasted no time on pleasantries, her gaze direct, unwavering. "Mom, I know what is happening with your mother, with Alara." She spoke my mother's name with a clinical, detached precision. "She has always been this way. I need you to understand that I am not, and will never be, a part of it." I merely listened, my expression carefully neutral. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping, gaining intensity. "A year ago, after Liam began to boast incessantly about his family's success, I ran a background check on you, a professional verification. I know precisely who you are, Major General. I served under your command in Kandahar. You pulled my unit out of an ambush in the Arghandab Valley. You saved my life." A profound jolt went through me. I remembered the firefight vividly, but in the chaos and relentless pressure of command, individual faces often blurred into a collective. To her, it was the definitive day she lived. To me, it was simply a Tuesday. For the very first time, I saw not my brother's fiancé, but a fellow soldier. A deep, unexpected warmth, a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been starving for, spread through my chest. "I owe you everything," she said, her voice thick with unwavering conviction. "So whatever you require, whenever you require it, I am your soldier on any battlefield. And that, Major General, includes this one." The profound sincerity in her eyes was a healing balm on a wound I hadn't even known was still open. For the first time in a very long time, I was not alone in the foxhole. Ava had one more crucial piece of intelligence. "There's someone you need to see," she said, sliding a crisp piece of paper across the table. It bore a name and an address in Alexandria, Dr. Maya Roshan. "She's retired now, but she knows your mother, and she's a friend." The following day, I drove to the address. It was a discreet brownstone office, the brass plaque on the door simply stating, M.H. consultant. Inside, it bore no resemblance to a typical therapist's office. There were no soft couches or saccharine inspirational posters. It was, unmistakably, a war room. Maps of various global hotspots were meticulously pinned to one wall. A large whiteboard, covered in complex diagrams and terse notes, dominated another. A powerful-looking woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and silver, streaked black hair rose from behind a large, imposing desk. This was Dr. Maya Roshan. She was an American woman of Indian descent, but she moved with the calm, self-assured authority of someone who had spent a lifetime navigating the intricate corridors of power in D.C. She had been a top strategist for the Defense Intelligence Agency, Major General Vance, she said, her voice warm yet businesslike. Ava called ahead. Please, be seated. As she poured 2 cups of Earl Grey tea, she got straight to the heart of the matter. I've known Elora Whitman for 30 years, from various boards and committees. I've observed her operate. Maya looked me directly in the eye, her gaze piercing. This is not merely a family squabble, Victoria. Your mother isn't just attacking your feelings. She's conducting a systematic campaign of information warfare to erase your identity and seize your father's legacy. And we, Major General, are going to fight back with the very same weapons, truth and precision. The word, resonated, a powerful echo in the quiet room. Maya opened a desk drawer and placed 2 small, innocuous items on the polished wood between us, a digital voice recorder no larger than a tube of lipstick, and a sleek, black encrypted USB drive. Your mother operates on manipulation and lies, spoken often in private, in hushed tones, Maya said, her voice steady and resolute. From this moment forward, you gather intelligence, you record everything, you document everything. We are meticulously building a case, your case. That evening, the 3 of us convened in Maya's war room, a major general, a captain, and a retired DIA strategist, a chosen family forged in shared purpose and unwavering resolve. There were no tears, no emotional hand-wringing. We spoke only of tactics. Ava, leveraging her unparalleled technical access, pulled up the intricate floor plans and security system schematics for the wedding venue. Maya began outlining a precise timeline, identifying key players on the guest list, influential journalists, powerful politicians, figures who could turn the tide of public opinion. I provided the ground truth, the painful history of my mother's actions, the psychological profile of my formidable opponent. For the very first time, I felt the tide beginning to turn, a subtle yet undeniable shift in the balance of power. The lonely path of the dim star was no longer a solo mission. A new constellation was forming around me. We were meticulously drawing up a battle plan to dismantle Elora Whitman's empire. Not with anger, but with cold, hard, incontrovertible facts. It was a campaign fueled by military precision, unparalleled intelligence expertise, and the unshakable loyalty of seasoned soldiers. The fight for my father's cherished legacy, and for my own reclaimed identity, had officially begun. 2 days after our intensive strategy session in Maya's war room, my mother called. Her voice over the phone was unnaturally warm, a tone I hadn't heard directed at me since I was a small child. She wanted to have dinner, just the 2 of us. A chance, she claimed, to reconnect before the impending wedding madness. My internal alarms blared with piercing intensity. This was a tactical move, undeniable, but Maya's words echoed in my mind like a clear, sharp command. Gather intelligence. This was my first critical opportunity. I'd like that, I said, my own voice carefully neutral, devoid of any discernible emotion. Before leaving my temporary apartment, I retrieved the small, sleek voice recorder Maya had given me. With a quiet click, I activated it and discreetly slipped it into my clutch. I was no longer merely a daughter attending dinner. I was an operative heading into hostile territory. Elora had chosen the inn at Little Washington. It was a legendary 3-Michelin star restaurant nestled amidst the idyllic Virginia countryside, a place of extreme luxury and hushed tones. It was also incredibly public, a favorite haunt of senators and CEOs, a profoundly strategic choice on her part. She knew I wouldn't dare make a scene there. The entire evening was a meticulously constructed stage. She was already seated when I arrived, looking impeccable in a silk dress, a single strand of perfect pearls gracing her throat. She smiled, a dazzling, public relations smile that never quite reached her cold, calculating eyes. "Victoria? Darling, you look well," she said, her gaze flicking over my simple black dress, a subtle judgment lurking in the pause. The meal itself was a masterpiece of culinary art. Dish after exquisite dish arrived, each one a tiny, edible sculpture on a plate, a carpaccio of herb-crusted baby lamb with Caesar salad ice cream, a pan-seared sea scallop with a black truffle vinaigrette. Between bites of food that tasted of nothing but hollow pretense, Alara performed. She spoke of the paramount importance of family, of how we needed to stand united. She reminisced about my childhood, cherry-picking vague, saccharine moments that felt as though they belonged to someone else's distant, idyllic life. She told me she had always been profoundly proud of my career, even if she didn't always know how to show it. It was a brilliant, nuanced performance, a monologue of manufactured warmth and counterfeit sentiment. Every single word was a meticulously crafted lie, a carefully polished stone laid on a treacherous path leading somewhere I knew, with an icy certainty, I did not want to go. The air grew thick with her insincerity. I felt a cold, tightening knot in my stomach. I wasn't having dinner with my mother. I was being expertly interrogated by a master manipulator. Then, with the arrival of the dessert course, a stunning 7-layer coconut cake, came the main event. Alara reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a neatly clipped folder of documents. She slid it across the pristine white tablecloth, placing it with chilling casualness right next to my plate. "Just a small matter of paperwork, dear," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, light as a feather, "to consolidate the family assets. It will make things so much easier to manage, and it will help Liam tremendously with his business ventures after the wedding. All you have to do is sign right here." My gaze fell to the folder. My heart began to pound, a hard, steady drumbeat against my ribs. This was not about consolidation. This was an ambush. I could feel the reassuring weight of the small recorder hidden in my clutch. I could hear Maya's voice, a clear, sharp command echoing in my head. "Never sign anything without your lawyer reviewing it." I opened the folder. The pages were dense with impenetrable legal jargon, but certain phrases leaped out at me with terrifying clarity. Relinquish all claims, transfer of title irrevocable. This was not a consolidation. This was a complete surrender. This was an act of utter erasure, a cynical attempt to sever me from the last physical piece of my father I had left his house. The blood rushed in my ears, a roaring torrent. She was attempting to steal my father's cherished legacy from me over a plate of expensive cake. I took a slow, deliberate breath, steadying myself. I closed the folder and gently, firmly pushed it back across the table toward her. "I think I'll need my lawyer to look this over first, Mother." The effect was instantaneous. Alara's perfect, practiced smile froze, then shattered like fine china dropped on a marble floor. Her eyes, which had been feigning warmth all evening, transformed into chips of glacial ice. The mask was utterly off. "Lawyer," she hissed, her voice low and venomous, a stark, ugly contrast to the elegant surroundings. "Victoria, we are family. Don't you trust your own mother?" The classic manipulation. The insidious appeal to a bond she herself had spent a lifetime systematically destroying. "This is a simple family matter. Don't be difficult and complicated. Just sign it." Her hand darted out, her perfectly manicured fingers pressing down on the folder, an order thinly disguised as a suggestion. I looked at her hand, then back up at her face, now contorted with a barely concealed fury. For the very first time I felt neither hurt nor shame. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity, an almost surgical detachment. The game was revealed in all its ugly simplicity. I stood up slowly, my movements calm and exquisitely measured. I took a crisp $100 bill from my clutch and placed it deliberately on the table, more than enough to cover my share and a generous tip. I'll have my lawyer send it back to you once he's reviewed it, I said, my voice even, steady, and devoid of any emotion. Then I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I could feel her enraged stare burning into my back as I crossed the dining room, my heels clicking softly on the polished floor. The hushed conversations of the other diners, the delicate clinking of silverware, the entire bubble of manufactured civility, all faded into an indistinct hum. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I knew one thing with an unshakable certainty: the battle had officially begun, and I had just fired the very first shot. The moment I stepped back into my temporary apartment after the dinner with Alara, I acted. There was no time for hesitation. My hands were steady as I retrieved my phone, laid the legal documents flat on the coffee table, and photographed each page with meticulous care. I sent the images to Maya in a secure message with a simple, potent heading: "Tonight's dinner conversation." Then I sat and waited, the profound silence of the room a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. The audio file from the recorder was already uploading to our shared, encrypted drive. A few hours later, my phone rang. It was Maya. Her voice, usually so calm and strategic, was laced with a chilling, cold fury. "Victoria, I've had my legal contact review these photos. This isn't a power of attorney. This is a full, unconditional waiver of your inheritance rights to the house. It's ironclad." She had it drawn up by a lawyer who specializes in contentious family disputes. "She was attempting to trick you into signing away your father's home." A wave of profound nausea washed over me. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to have it confirmed in such brutal, unequivocal legal terms. She had intended to strip me of everything. As if on cue, a text message alert pinned. It was from Ava. There was no accompanying text, just a solitary link. My finger trembled slightly as I tapped it. The link took me to a well-known local Virginia society blog, the kind that meticulously chronicles the lives of the wealthy and powerful in the D.C. area. The headline seemed to leap off the screen, written in a bold, sanctimonious font: "The Whitman Family and the Prodigal Daughter. A Sad Tale?" The article itself was a masterpiece of character assassination, anonymously sourced but clearly fed directly by Alara. It painted me as a difficult and reclusive daughter who had callously abandoned her family to pursue a vague and unsettling career. It insinuated, with practiced insidiousness, that my time in the military had left me with profound psychological issues, rendering me unstable and prone to jealousy over my brother's impending marriage. It brazenly claimed I was actively trying to cause trouble for his wedding, but the worst part, the part that made the blood freeze in my veins, was the picture. They had unearthed an old photograph of me, taken right after a grueling 72-hour mission in a combat zone. I was utterly exhausted, my face smudged with dirt, my eyes hollow and haunted. They had cropped it, enlarged it, and used it, with cruel precision, to illustrate their fabricated narrative of the unhinged veteran. It was a violation so profound, so deeply personal, it stole the very air from my lungs. They didn't just desire to disinherit me. They wanted to utterly destroy me, to discredit me so completely that no one would ever believe a single word I uttered. My service, my sacrifices, the very things that had defined my existence, they were twisting them into insidious weapons to be used against me. I dropped the phone on the couch as if it were a burning ember. I sank into the suffocating darkness of the unlit living room, the city lights twinkling mockingly outside my window. For a moment, I felt the crushing weight of it all: the lies, the betrayal, the sheer, calculated cruelty. I felt the floor give way beneath me, plunging into an abyss of despair. And then, like a guiding beacon in the profound darkness, I remembered my father's resonant voice speaking of the dim stars. Maya's firm command to fight back with unwavering truth. Ava's fierce voice pledging her absolute loyalty. I was not alone in this profound darkness. I reached for my laptop, my movements stiff at first. Then, gaining a resolute certainty, I opened the web browser and typed "Brené Brown, the Man in the Arena," into the search bar. I clicked on the video of her Netflix special. the call to courage, and fast-forwarded to the part I desperately needed to hear. Her voice filled the silent room, strong and clear, quoting Theodore Roosevelt's timeless, powerful words. "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the door of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly." I closed my eyes, letting the profound wisdom of the words wash over me. The critics, Alara, Liam, their soulless friends, the faceless blogger, they were all just critics. They were mere spectators, comfortably seated in the cheap seats of the arena, safe and secure, casting judgment on a game they were too cowardly to ever truly play. But me, I had always been in the arena. My face had been marred by the dust of Afghanistan. My hands knew the grit and grime of the fight. I had stumbled, I had bled, and I had dared greatly. I opened my eyes. The fear was gone, the hurt was gone. All that remained was a cold, hard, crystalline clarity. The path forward was illuminated with an almost blinding light. They had sought to push me out of the family, and in so doing, with an ironic twist of fate, they had pushed me right back into the one place I truly belonged, the battlefield. And I am certain some of you listening know precisely what that moment feels like, the moment the searing pain stops and the unwavering purpose begins. I picked up my phone. My hand was rock steady now, devoid of any tremor. I dialed Maya's number. She answered on the very first ring. "Activate everything," I said, my voice low, utterly devoid of any emotion except for pure, unadulterated resolve. "It's time to enter my arena." My final words to Maya on the phone, "It's time to enter my arena," were not a plea. They were an executive order. The response was immediate and decisive. The next 48 hours were a blur of focused, relentless preparation. Maya's quiet office in Alexandria transformed into a full-fledged command center. The whiteboard, once covered in abstract diagrams, was now a meticulously detailed battle plan. A precise floor plan of the hotel ballroom was pinned in the center, marked with ingress and egress routes, identified camera blind spots, and optimal lines of sight. Ava, leveraging her unparalleled technical skills, had procured schematics of the venue's intricate A to V system, giving us complete control over every microphone and projector screen in the room. We operated with the quiet, seamless efficiency of a seasoned military unit. Maya, the master strategist, worked her extensive network of contacts. She compiled a comprehensive list of key guests, not just the powerful, but the truly influential. She identified 3 prominent investigative journalists and a handful of social media influencers renowned for breaking national stories. A comprehensive digital dossier, containing every single piece of irrefutable evidence we had meticulously gathered, was prepared and encrypted, poised to be deployed at the precise, opportune moment. Maya had already discreetly briefed a trusted investigative reporter from a major national newspaper, priming him to expect a crucial package at the exact hour of our choosing. Ava served as my indispensable intelligence officer. She meticulously monitored online chatter, tracking the insidious spread of the hit piece Alara had planted. She created a detailed, minute-by-minute timeline of events for the wedding ceremony, predicting choke points and critical moments of opportunity. There was no emotion, only cold, hard data. Who would speak and precisely when, where Alara would be seated. The exact moment the ceremony would transition to the reception, every minute detail was a potential advantage to be exploited. My role was command. I made the call that would secure our most critical asset. Using a secure line, I contacted Major General Alastair Thorne, my former commanding officer and revered mentor, now a 4-star general at the Pentagon. I did not complain or offer emotional backstory. I presented the situation like a crisp, concise field report, a factual briefing on a deliberate campaign of misinformation targeting a senior officer. "Sir, I require 2 critical assets," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. the unredacted after-action report for Operation Desert Aegis, and a formal video confirmation of my service record and decorations from the Pentagon. There was a palpable pause on the other end of the line, a silence heavy with contemplation and profound understanding. Major General Thorne was a man of few words, but immense integrity and unshakable loyalty. I knew he understood the unspoken context, the deeper implications of my request. "The files will be on a secure server for you within the hour, Major General," he finally said, his voice like gravel and tempered steel. "It's high time the full story of what you and your soldiers did in that valley was properly recognized." He didn't ask for more details. He didn't question my motives. That was the unyielding loyalty of the uniform, a sacred bond forged in shared duty and sacrifice that my mother, in her shallow world, could never begin to comprehend. The night before the wedding, I did not sleep. The city lights of Alexandria bled through the blinds, but my focus was entirely within the four walls of my temporary room. I had retrieved my Class A Army service uniform, the formal dress blues, from its garment bag. It was the uniform of ceremony, of unwavering tradition, of hard-won honor. Under the stark, revealing light of the desk lamp, I began the solemn, almost ritualistic process of preparing my armor. I laid out the jacket and meticulously began to affix my decorations. Each medal, each vibrant ribbon, was a chapter in the life my mother had so desperately tried to erase. The Silver Star for gallantry in action during the very ambush Ava had survived. The Purple Heart? A silent, stark testament to the shrapnel that had torn through my shoulder in a different, brutal firefight, a story I had never even attempted to share with my indifferent family. The Defense Superior Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star. Each gleaming pin I pushed through the deep blue fabric was a vivid memory of fallen comrade, a sleepless night spent under enemy fire, a moment of profound terror, a surge of hard-won pride. They were a silent, metallic language that articulated the true, unvarnished story of my service, a story forged in sweat and blood, not the dry, administrative fiction my mother had so casually created. I retrieved my portable steamer, the gentle hiss of the hot vapor filling the quiet room. I meticulously worked on every single inch of the uniform, smoothing out every potential wrinkle, ensuring every crease was razor sharp, every line absolutely perfect. The polished brass buttons gleamed like precious gold coins. The two gleaming silver stars of a major general on each shoulder epaulet shone with a cold, hard, resolute light. This was more than just preparation. It was a profound transformation. I was shedding the ill-fitting costume of the difficult daughter they had so relentlessly tried to force upon me. I was stepping, with unwavering resolve, back into my own authentic skin. When I was finished, I hung the uniform, a perfect effigy of honor and unwavering discipline. I stood before it, seeing not just a jacket, but the living embodiment of my sacred oath. Elara had chosen her weapons: lies, insidious manipulation, and public shame. I had chosen mine, forged in the crucible of duty and truth. I wasn't merely getting ready for a wedding. I was preparing for a reckoning. I wasn't putting on a dress. I was putting on my armor. The grand ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel in Washington, D.C., was a shimmering sea of pastel silks, perfectly tailored tuxedos, and the soft, ethereal glow of crystal chandeliers. A string quartet played something light and classical, a delicate, almost ethereal soundtrack for the union of two influential families. My brother, Liam, stood at the altar, looking handsome and radiating an unwarranted confidence. My mother, Elara, sat in the front row, the perfect image of the proud matriarch, radiating a serene, regal calm. The ceremony had just begun. The procession was over. The minister was welcoming the assembled guests. This was as meticulously planned. The grand oak doors at the back of the ballroom swung open with a soft, deliberate creak, but the person who entered was not a late, arriving guest in a flowing gown. It was me. I stepped into the room, and a shockwave of profound silence radiated outwards from the doorway. Every sound ceased. The delicate music faltered, a single violin note dying, suspended in the air. The low murmur of the 300 guests evaporated instantly. Every head turned. Every single pair of eyes locked onto me. I was not wearing a dress. I was wearing my armor. The deep blue jacket of my army service uniform was immaculate, every stitch a testament to rigorous discipline. The brass buttons gleamed, catching the light, and the rows of vibrant ribbons on my chest were a vivid, undeniable testament to a life they had so vehemently tried to deny. The two gleaming silver stars of a major general on each shoulder epaulet seemed to catch and hold the very light of the crystal chandeliers, radiating an undeniable power. I saw my mother's face. Her serene, practiced smile froze, then fractured like delicate fine china, dropped on a marble floor. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, chalk, white mask of abject horror. Beside her, Liam's jaw went slack, his confident posture crumbling, and he stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning, sickening panic. I ignored them all. With my back ramrod straight and my gaze fixed resolutely forward, I walked with a calm, measured pace down the long aisle. I did not stop at the front. I located an empty chair in the last row, sat down with quiet dignity, and folded my hands in my lap, becoming a quiet, yet utterly formidable presence at the back of their perfect, illusionary party. The ceremony sputtered back to life, but the atmosphere had been irrevocably altered. The air was thick with tension and whispered, incredulous questions. The minister, flustered and visibly unnerved, rushed through the vows. When he reached the classic, pivotal line, "If anyone has any objection to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace," an electric, pregnant silence filled the opulent room. No one spoke. The real objection was not to the marriage itself, but to the intricate web of lies upon which it was built. Finally, it was time for the family remarks. Elora, looking visibly shaken, began to rise from her seat to deliver what I was certain would be a polished, pre-written speech. But she was too late. Someone else was already moving toward the microphone. It was the bride. Captain Ava Rossi, a vision in an elegant white gown, stepped gracefully to the lectern. She looked breathtaking, radiating an ethereal beauty, but her expression was one of solemn, unshakable purpose. She did not look at her groom. She did not look at the stunned audience. She turned her body slightly, directing her entire attention to the last row, to me. The entire room held its collective breath. "Before I begin my new life," Ava said, her voice clear and strong, amplified by the microphone, "I must first honor the person who gave me the chance to have this life at all." She straightened her shoulders in her beautiful wedding dress, drawing herself up to a precise position of attention, and then, in a gesture of profound respect and unwavering loyalty, she raised her hand to her brow in a sharp, perfect military salute. "To Major General Victoria Vance," she declared, her voice ringing with indisputable truth. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. The title, spoken with such reverence, hung in the air like a detonation. Major General. My mother's face contorted in a silent scream of agony. Ava was not finished. She lowered her hand and continued, her voice resonating with an unshakable conviction. "The Major General sitting in the back row is the woman who saved my life and the lives of 5 other soldiers during Operation Desert Aegis in Kandahar." That was the cue. At that exact, critical moment, the massive projector screen behind the altar, which had been tastefully displaying a monogram of the bride and groom's initials, flickered dramatically to life. The monogram was instantly replaced by the unredacted after-action report of the mission, my name and rank clearly visible for all to see. Then, a powerful montage of photos, me in the field, covered in dust and grit, me with my unit, my face grim but resolute, me receiving the Silver Star, a moment of profound, quiet honor. The screen then displayed a high-resolution image of my decorations, each one meticulously named and explained. And then, the final, undeniable asset, the video from Major General Alastair Thorne. His stern, authoritative face filled the screen, impeccably dressed in his full Class A uniform. He looked directly into the camera and confirmed my rank, my service record, and the precise circumstances of my commendations. his voice leaving absolutely no room for doubt. Simultaneously, as Maya hit send from her command center, the phones of every journalist in the room began to buzz and chime, a resounding chorus of incoming alerts. The comprehensive dossier was delivered. It was too much for Alara. Her carefully constructed world was shattering in real time before her horrified, disbelieving eyes. She leapt from her seat, her composure completely gone, replaced by raw, visceral rage. "Stop this!" she shrieked, her voice raw and ugly, stripped of all pretense. "This is a lie! All of it is a lie!" She lunged toward the stage, a desperate, futile attempt to stop the unstoppable, but it was far, far too late. From the stunned, disbelieving silence of the crowd, a single person began to clap, then another, and another. It started slowly, a hesitant ripple, then grew into a powerful wave, a thunderous, rolling ovation that shook the entire ballroom. The guests were getting to their feet, not for the bride and groom, but for the solitary soldier in the back row. They were applauding the undeniable truth. They were applauding a hero who had finally, unequivocally, been seen. I sat perfectly still in my chair, in the very heart of the storm I had unleashed, and let the resonant sound of my vindication wash over me. In the aftermath of the thunderous applause, an unnerving silence fell within me. The adrenaline that had surged through my veins ebbed away, leaving behind a profound, hollow exhaustion. I slipped out of the ballroom, unnoticed amidst the ensuing chaos, leaving the wreckage of my family's perfect evening behind. The battle, in that moment, was over, but now came the inevitable aftershocks. The next morning, the storm broke with full, unbridled force. My story was emblazoned across the front page of the Washington Post above the fold. The headline was stark, yet powerfully resonant. "The Invisible Major General, Pentagon confirms heroism of officer hidden by own family." The name, the Invisible Major General, stuck. I had, overnight, become a national phenomenon. Every major news network picked up the story, dissecting every detail. The digital dossier Maya had released went viral with lightning speed, and the blog post that had so maliciously attempted to assassinate my character was now universally held up as an egregious example of malicious deceit and professional impropriety. Alara's meticulously constructed social empire did not merely crack, it disintegrated overnight. The boards of the prestigious charities she chaired quietly, yet firmly, requested her immediate resignation. The coveted invitations to the exclusive DC galas and fundraisers ceased to arrive. The powerful friends who had once flocked to her opulent parties now studiously avoided her calls, their loyalty as shallow as her own hollow values. Her currency, her meticulously cultivated reputation, had been rendered utterly worthless. The wedding, of course, was officially cancelled. Ava told me she had returned the ridiculously large engagement ring to Liam that very night, leaving it with a quiet finality on the table of the lavish hotel suite he had booked for their wedding night. She was free, truly free. 2 days later, my younger brother, Liam, showed up at my apartment. Liam looked utterly terrible. His usually perfect hair was a disheveled mess. His expensive clothes were rumpled and stained, and there were profound, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who had watched his gilded world collapse into ruins. He stood in my doorway, not with an apology, but with an accusation, his voice a ragged whisper of disbelief. "You ruined everything," he repeated, "everything. Did you have to do it like that?" I looked at my younger brother, the boy I had once instinctively protected on the playground, the man I had tried desperately to love despite the impenetrable wall my mother had so carefully constructed between us. And for the very first time, I saw him with perfect, agonizing clarity. I saw not a victim, but a willing, complicit accomplice. I saw the inherent weakness, the ingrained entitlement, the profound, crippling selfishness that had allowed him to stand idly by and watch me be erased, time and time again. There was no flicker of remorse in his eyes, only self-pity. The last vestiges of sisterly affection within me withered and died, a quiet, final surrender. "No, Liam?" I replied, my voice calm, steady. and utterly devoid of the anger he so clearly expected. I didn't ruin anything, I simply turned on the lights. Mother's lies and your profound silence, your complicity, is what ruined everything. You chose your side a very long time ago. He merely stared at me, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly, like a fish out of water. He was stunned, not by the content of my words, but by the fact that they held no anger, no room for argument. They were simply a statement of immutable fact. I closed the door gently in his face, the soft click of the lock a definitive, final sound. It was the closing of a painful chapter I should have ended years, perhaps decades, ago. The final piece of business was the house, my father's house, the grand stage for all of Ellora's shallow vanities. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense man highly recommended by Maya, drafted and dispatched the official notice. It wasn't an eviction. That would have been a cruel, vengeful act, and my mission is about justice, not the fleeting satisfaction of revenge. The notice was far more strategic, more precise. It informed Elara that as the legal owner of the property, I would not be forcing her to leave. Instead, effective immediately, she would be required to pay monthly rent at the current fair market value for a property of that substantial size in McLean, Virginia. It was a staggering sum, a significant financial burden. Furthermore, the document meticulously stipulated that 100% of that substantial rent money would be paid directly from her account into a charitable trust I had quietly established. The Colonel Marcus Vance Legacy Fund, dedicated exclusively to providing scholarships for the deserving children of fallen and wounded service members. My father's house would no longer be a monument to social climbing and empty prestige. It would become precisely what he would have wanted, a true, enduring legacy of selfless service. It would educate children. It would support families who, like mine, had made the ultimate sacrifice for this great country. It would be a source of profound honor, a beacon of hope. My mother could continue to reside in her gilded palace. But now it would be a gilded cage, a constant, monthly reminder of her devastating defeat. She would be funding the very values she had spent her entire life despising and attempting to extinguish. I had drawn my new boundary. It wasn't built of bricks and mortar or of anger and festering resentment. It was built of truth, of unwavering justice, and of the unyielding law. It was a wall she could never, ever tear down. Standing there in my quiet apartment, I finally understood what a true inheritance truly was. It wasn't a house. It was the profound, inner strength to protect what you hold sacred. The storm passed. The relentless news cycle moved on, and in the quiet aftermath, I began to understand the true nature of peace. It wasn't the absence of conflict, but the profound presence of a quiet, unwavering internal alignment. The war for external recognition was over, because I no longer needed it from the outside world. Several months later, an invitation arrived that felt like a direct message from my father himself. I was asked to be the keynote speaker at the prestigious graduation ceremony for the United States Military Academy at West Point. Standing on that historic rostrum, looking out at the magnificent sea of cadets in their crisp gray uniforms, the long gray line, I felt my father's profound pride swell within me, a palpable, comforting presence. This was the stage he had always dreamed of for me, but as I looked into their young, eager faces, I knew I couldn't speak to them about conventional warfare. They would learn enough about that soon enough. So I spoke about a different kind of combat, a more personal arena. "We train you here for the battlefields of the world," I said, my voice steady and resonant over the podium, reaching every corner of the vast hall. "But I am here to tell you that sometimes the most difficult arena you will ever fight in is the one within your own home. The most courageous act is not always facing enemy fire, but speaking the truth to those who are supposed to love you most deeply. Honor is not just a word we embroider on our flags. It is a sacred boundary you must draw to protect your own soul." Looking out at the future leaders of our great army, I felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost startling. I was giving them the map I never truly had, the one my father had so lovingly tried to draw for me in the silent language of the stars. When I returned to my apartment in D.C., an email was waiting for me. It wasn't from the Pentagon or a major news agency. It was from a small, unassuming foundation called Solace for Soldiers, Kids, a scholarship fund I had been quietly financing for years with a portion of my military salary. It was my secret legacy, a quiet act of service no one else knew about. The email contained a short video file. I clicked play. A young woman appeared on the screen, her face bright with a joy so radiant, it was profoundly contagious. She was standing in what looked like a simple college dorm room, a university banner hanging proudly on the wall behind her. "Hi," she began a little shyly. "My name is Sarah, and my dad was Sergeant David Jensen. He was killed in action in Iraq. I was told this video might get to the anonymous donor who funded my scholarship." She took a breath, her eyes shining with unshed tears, yet brimming with hope. "I just wanted to say thank you. My whole life, people have looked at me with pity. My mom works 2 jobs, and college felt like an impossible dream. But you believed in me. Whoever you are, thank you for believing in me when no one else did." The video ended. I sat there in the profound silence of my apartment, tears streaming down my face. But they weren't tears of sorrow or anger. They were tears of pure, unadulterated contentment, a quiet, profound joy. The front page stories, the public applause, the forced surrender of my mother, none of it mattered as much as this. This single, heartfelt thank you from a girl I would likely never meet. This was it. This was my real legacy. Not the medals on my chest, but the quiet, profound impact I could have on a single life, unseen and uncredited. I was my father's dim star, and I was finally guiding someone home. I turned to my laptop, the view of the Potomac River, a calm, steady presence outside my window. I opened a new, blank document. I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. My fight, in many ways, was over, but I realized I had one more vital mission. I needed to tell this story, not for fame, not for vindication, but for the other silent soldiers out there, for the forgotten sons and daughters, for anyone standing alone in their own private arena, feeling invisible, unheard. My fingers found the keyboard. I typed the very first words. They say home is where the heart is. But sometimes you have to leave home to find your heart again. That is my story, and I chose to tell it because I know, with absolute certainty, I am not the only one who has fought a battle in silence. Perhaps your arena was not a ballroom, and perhaps your critics were not your family, but we all, in our unique ways, have our own struggles for recognition and self-worth. Your story matters, too. If my journey has resonated with you, if it has stirred something within your own spirit, please share your thoughts, your own stories, in the comments below. We are all connected by these shared human struggles, and by finding our voice, we find our strength. Thank you for listening. You are not alone.